What if I told you that your soul knows when death is coming, sometimes years before it happens? What if the changes you're experiencing right now, the strange pull towards solitude, the sudden loss of interest in things that used to matter, the vivid dreams of deceased loved ones, what if these aren't symptoms of depression or aging or illness? What if they're signs that your consciousness is preparing for the most profound transition you will ever make? What if death is not a sudden event that happens to you, but a carefully orchestrated process that your soul actively participates in? A journey that begins not in the final moments of life, but months, sometimes years, before the physical body stops functioning. For thousands of years, spiritual traditions, hospice workers, and those who sit with the dying have observed specific patterns. 5 unmistakable signs that appear when the soul begins to detach from the physical world. Signs that indicate the consciousness is preparing to return to its natural, expanded state. These signs don't mean you're going to die tomorrow. They don't mean you should give up on life or stop fighting illness. What they mean is that on some level deeper than your conscious mind, your soul is beginning a sacred process. A process of completion, of integration, of preparation for what comes next. And here's what most people don't understand. Recognizing these signs, understanding what they mean, preparing your soul for this transition, this doesn't lead to fear or despair. It leads to the most conscious, most present, most meaningful period of your entire life. Today, you're going to learn the 5 signs that death is approaching. Not the medical signs, not the physical symptoms, but the spiritual indicators that your consciousness is preparing to transcend the physical body. You're going to understand what each sign means, why it happens, and what it's asking you to do. You're going to discover that the practices that prepare you for death are the exact same practices that help you live more fully right now. That facing your mortality with awareness doesn't diminish life, it intensifies it. That preparing your soul for death is actually the key to experiencing the deepest peace, love, and meaning available to human beings. By the end of this video, you will know how to recognize these signs in yourself or in those you love. You'll understand how to support the sacred process that's unfolding. And you'll learn how to use this awareness to live with more presence, more gratitude, more authentic connection than you ever thought possible. So let me ask you directly, are you afraid of death, or are you ready to understand it, to prepare for it consciously, to transform it from something that terrifies you into something that teaches you how to truly live? Because for the next 50 minutes, I'm going to show you the signs. And once you see them, you'll never look at life or death the same way again. Let's begin with the first and most misunderstood sign, the pull toward solitude. Sign 1, the pull of solitude, the sacred turning inward. There comes a time in some people's lives when they begin to crave solitude in a way they never have before. Not the occasional need for alone time that everyone experiences, but a deep, almost magnetic pull toward being alone, toward silence, toward stillness. This is not depression. It's not social anxiety. It's not a symptom of illness or a personality disorder. It's something far more profound. It's the soul beginning to turn inward, preparing for the ultimate journey inward that death represents. Think about animals in nature. When they sense death approaching, they often leave the herd or the pack. They find a quiet, secluded place. They withdraw from the social world. This isn't because they're sick or weak. It's because some ancient instinct tells them that dying is a solitary process, that it requires all of their attention, all of their energy, all of their awareness. Humans have this same instinct. But unlike animals, we fight it. We interpret it through the lens of our psychology, our culture, our fear. We think something is wrong with us. We force ourselves to be social when our soul is crying out for solitude. We seek therapy to fix what we see as a problem, when actually what's happening is profoundly sacred. The pull towards solitude that comes as death approaches is not about avoiding people. It's about creating space for deep inner work, work that the soul knows must be completed before the transition. Let me tell you about Margaret, a hospice patient I learned about through a nurse's account. Margaret had been a social butterfly her entire life. Parties, gatherings, book clubs, volunteer organizations. She was always surrounded by people. She thrived on social interaction. Then, about 18 months before her death, something changed. She started declining invitations. She stopped hosting her famous dinner parties. She would sit for hours alone in her garden, just being still, just being quiet. Her friends worried. They thought she was depressed. They tried to pull her back into social life. They organized surprise visits, planned activities, did everything they could to bring back the old Margaret. But Margaret wasn't depressed. She told the hospice nurse, "I finally understand what I've been running from my whole life. All that socializing, all that activity, I was avoiding myself, avoiding the deeper questions, avoiding the silence where truth lives. Now, I don't want to avoid anymore. I want to be with myself, to know myself before I leave this body." The pull towards solitude is the soul's way of creating space for three essential processes. First, it creates space for detachment from external dependencies. When we're constantly engaged with others, we define ourselves through those relationships, through those interactions. The soul knows that death requires letting go of all external definitions, of all roles and identities that depend on the physical world. Solitude allows us to discover who we are beneath all of that. Second, it creates space for reflection and integration. The soul is preparing to review the entire life it has lived. That requires deep contemplation. It requires time alone with memories, with regrets, with joys, with all the experiences that make up a lifetime. You cannot do this work in a crowded room. Third, it creates space for the opening of perception that we'll discuss later. When you're alone, when you're quiet, when the noise of the external world fades, you become sensitive to subtle realities, to dimensions of consciousness that are drowned out by constant social stimulation. If you're experiencing this pull towards solitude, if you're noticing that you crave time alone more than you used to, if social obligations that once energized you now feel draining, pay attention. Your soul might be telling you something important. This doesn't necessarily mean death is imminent. The soul can begin this preparation years before the body fails. But it does mean you're entering a sacred phase of life, a phase that requires honoring the need for solitude rather than fighting it. And here's the paradox. When you honor this pull towards solitude, when you give yourself permission to be alone, to be quiet, to turn inward, you don't become isolated or lonely. You become more present, more authentic, more capable of genuine connection when you do engage with others. Because you're no longer using social interaction to avoid yourself. You're coming from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, from presence rather than distraction. The pull of solitude is not the soul giving up on life. It's the soul preparing for something greater than life as we know it. And in that preparation, it's discovering depths of consciousness that most people never access. If someone you love is experiencing this pull, don't try to drag them back into constant social engagement. Support their need for solitude. Visit when invited, but don't force it. Understand that they're doing important work, sacred work, and your role is to honor that, not to interrupt it. The first sign is the pull towards solitude, the soul turning inward, creating space for what comes next. Sign 2, the dissolving of attachments, letting go of what once mattered. The second sign that death is preparing to come is subtle but profound. It's the gradual dissolving of attachments to things, to status, to the ego's endless needs and desires. People approaching death, whether they consciously know it or not, begin to lose interest in material possessions, in their legacy, in their reputation, in being right, in all the things that seemed so important for most of their lives. This isn't apathy. It's not giving up. It's a shift in consciousness from the temporary to the eternal, from the ego to the soul. Let me describe what this looks like in practice. A man who spent his entire career building a business empire suddenly doesn't care about the quarterly reports. He stops micromanaging. He delegates more, not because he's losing his mental faculties, but because on some deep level, his soul knows that none of this will matter soon, that his true wealth has nothing to do with money or success. A woman who was always meticulous about her appearance, who never left the house without perfect hair and makeup, starts going out in sweatpants, stops dyeing her gray hair, wears comfortable shoes instead of fashionable ones. Not because she's depressed, but because the ego's investment in appearance is dissolving. The soul doesn't care what the body looks like. Someone who held grudges for decades, who couldn't let go of old wounds and betrayals, suddenly forgives, reaches out to estranged family members, lets go of the need to be right, to be validated, to have their pain acknowledged. Not because they've forgotten what happened, but because the soul recognizes that carrying these wounds across the threshold of death serves no purpose. This dissolving of attachments happens in stages. It often begins with material possessions. People start giving things away, not in a morbid preparing for death way, but with genuine joy. I want you to have this now, while I can see you enjoy it. They clean out closets, simplify their living spaces, reduce the clutter that once seemed important. Then it moves to status and identity. The titles, the roles, the accomplishments that define them begin to feel hollow. A respected professor stops caring about academic politics. A successful businessman stops networking. A social media influencer stops posting. Not because they're failing at these things, but because the soul is withdrawing its energy from identities that only exist in the physical world. Finally, it reaches the deepest level. The ego itself begins to dissolve. The constant need to defend yourself, to prove yourself, to maintain a carefully constructed image, all of this starts to feel like too much work for too little return. I learned about a man named David through a friend who worked in palliative care. David had been a trial lawyer for 40 years. His entire identity was built on being right, on winning arguments, on never backing down. He was brilliant, successful, and absolutely insufferable according to his own children. About 2 years before his death from cancer, something shifted. He stopped arguing with his wife about petty things. He called his estranged daughter and apologized for being an absent father without making excuses or defending himself. He started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, helping people who couldn't pay, expecting nothing in return. His wife asked him what had changed. He said, I woke up one morning and realized I've spent my whole life fighting, proving I'm smarter, better, right. And for what? None of it will matter. The only thing that matters is whether I loved people. Well, whether I was kind. Everything else is just noise. David didn't know he was dying. His cancer hadn't been diagnosed yet. But his soul knew. And it was already beginning the process of letting go of everything that wouldn't survive death. This is the dissolving of attachments. The soul recognizing that most of what we spend our lives pursuing has no eternal value. That only love, wisdom, compassion, growth, only these things can be carried forward. And here's what's beautiful about this sign. When attachments dissolve, freedom emerges. The burden of maintaining the ego, of defending your status, of accumulating and protecting possessions, this burden is exhausting. When it lifts, what remains is a lightness, a simplicity, a focus on what truly matters. People experiencing this often describe feeling more alive than they've ever felt, even as death approaches. Because for the first time, they're not wasting energy on the trivial. They're not scattered across 1,000 meaningless concerns. They're focused, present, engaged with the essential. If you're noticing that things that used to matter no longer do, if you're losing interest in status and possessions and ego gratification, don't panic. Don't interpret this as depression or loss of ambition. Consider the possibility that your soul is guiding you toward what's truly important. And if someone you love is going through this, don't try to reinvest them in their old attachments. Don't say, you need to care about your appearance, or you can't just give up on your career, or you need to stop being so nice to people who don't deserve it. Instead, recognize that they're becoming free, that the ego is loosening its grip, that the soul is preparing for a journey that requires traveling light. The second sign is the dissolving of attachments. The soul withdrawing its energy from the temporary and investing it in the eternal. Sign 3. The opening of perception. Seeing beyond the veil. The third sign is perhaps the most mystical and the most misunderstood. As death approaches, the boundary between the physical world and other dimensions of reality begins to thin. Perception expands. People start seeing, hearing, sensing things that most people cannot. In medical settings, this is often dismissed as confusion, hallucination, or the effects of medication. But hospice workers who have sat with thousands of dying people know better. What they witness is too consistent, too meaningful, too evidential to be mere hallucination. This opening of perception manifests in several ways. First, vivid dreams of deceased loved ones. Not the vague symbolic dreams we all have occasionally, but clear lucid encounters that feel more real than waking life. The dying person sees their deceased mother, father, spouse, child, and they have conversations. They receive comfort. They're told, it's almost time. We're waiting for you. These dreams are different from normal dreams. People wake from them with absolute certainty that they've actually communicated with the dead. And the emotional effect is profound. Fear of death dissolves. Peace replaces anxiety. Because they now know, not believe, but know that consciousness continues and that they won't be alone when they transition. Second, heightened intuition and psychic sensitivity. People suddenly know things they shouldn't know. They predict events before they happen. They sense the emotions and intentions of others with startling accuracy. They know when someone is about to call or visit before it happens. This isn't magic. It's the normal filtering function of the brain beginning to relax. The brain's job during life is to limit perception, to filter out the overwhelming amount of information constantly available to consciousness. As death approaches, this filter weakens, perception expands, and the dying person begins to access information through channels that aren't limited to the five physical senses. Third, seeing presences or beings that others cannot see. The dying person might suddenly look at a corner of the room and smile, greeting someone who isn't physically there. They might have conversations with invisible visitors. They might describe beings of light, angels, guides, or simply presences that they sense but cannot fully see. Medical staff often witness this. A patient who has been unresponsive suddenly becomes alert, looks at something no one else can see, and says, "Yes, I'm ready," or "I understand," or simply "beautiful." And then they pass peacefully, minutes or hours later. Let me tell you about a case documented by Dr. Christopher Kerr, a hospice physician who has researched end-of-life experiences for decades. A World War II veteran named John had been in hospice for weeks, barely responsive, his body failing. Then, one afternoon, he suddenly sat up, his eyes wide and focused on something across the room. The nurse asked him what he was seeing. John said, "They're all here. My whole unit, the guys who died at Normandy. They've been waiting for me all these years. They're telling me it's time to come home." John wasn't confused. He was lucid, emotional, deeply moved by what he was experiencing. He described each of his fallen comrades by name, told stories about them, cried tears of joy at seeing them again. 2 hours later, he died peacefully, a smile on his face. Was this hallucination? Brain chemistry misfiring as organs shut down? Or was John actually perceiving a dimension of reality that exists parallel to our physical world, a dimension that becomes visible as the boundary between life and death grows thin? Hospice workers tend to believe the latter because they see it too often, because the experiences are too consistent, because the effects are too real. People who have these expanded perceptions lose their fear of death completely. They become peaceful, accepting, even eager to make the transition. That's not the effect of hallucination. That's the effect of genuine perception. The opening of perception also manifests as increased sensitivity to energy and frequency. Colors seem more vibrant. Music feels more profound. Nature becomes almost unbearably beautiful. It's as if the volume of existence has been turned up. One woman described it like this: "I've looked at that tree outside my window every day for 20 years. But now I really see it. I see the life force moving through it. I see its energy, its consciousness. I understand that it's not just a thing, it's a being. And I can feel its presence, its awareness. Everything is alive in a way I never understood before." This is not delirium. This is expanded consciousness. This is the soul beginning to perceive reality the way it will perceive it after death, when it's no longer limited by the physical brain's filtering systems. If you're experiencing this opening of perception, if you're having vivid dreams of the deceased, if you're sensing presences or experiencing heightened intuition, you have two choices. You can dismiss it as meaningless, as hallucination, as symptoms of illness or medication, or you can recognize it as a gift, as your consciousness expanding beyond its normal boundaries, as a preview of what awaits you beyond death. And if someone you love is experiencing this, please, please don't dismiss their experiences. Don't say you're just confused, or it's the medication talking, or there's nothing there. Believe them. Validate their experiences. Ask them what they're seeing, what they're learning, what messages they're receiving, because they're perceiving something real, something profound, something that most people only access at the very end of life, when it's too late to integrate the wisdom it offers. The third sign is the opening of perception, the thinning of the veil between physical and spiritual reality, the soul beginning to see beyond the limitations of physical existence. Before we continue to the final two signs, I want to check in with you. We've covered the pull towards solitude, the dissolving of attachments, and the opening of perception. Are you recognizing these patterns? Have you experienced any of these signs yourself or witnessed them in someone you love? Take a moment and comment below. Let me know which sign resonates most with you. And if this information is helping you understand death in a new way, make sure you're subscribed. Because what comes next, the final two signs, these are the most powerful and the most important. The signs that allow you to complete your life's work before you go. Sign 4. The life review compulsion, the urgent need to understand. The fourth sign that death is preparing to approach is a sudden, almost obsessive need to review and understand the meaning of your entire life. Not casual reminiscing, not simple nostalgia, but a deep, urgent compulsion to make sense of everything that's happened, to find the patterns, to understand the purpose, to extract the wisdom. This is the soul preparing for the comprehensive life review that many spiritual traditions and near-death experience accounts describe occurring immediately after death. But the soul doesn't wait for death to begin this process. It starts months or years before, while there's still time to complete unfinished business. The life review compulsion manifests in several distinct ways. First, there's an intense drive to understand relationships. Why did that friendship fall apart? What was the real lesson in that failed marriage? Why did I have such a difficult relationship with my father? What was the purpose of that painful betrayal? These aren't idle questions. They're pursued with focus and energy. People reach out to old friends they haven't spoken to in decades. They ask questions they've avoided for years. They seek understanding, clarity, closure. I learned about a woman named Patricia who, at age 78, suddenly became obsessed with understanding her relationship with her sister, who had died 20 years earlier. They'd had a falling out in their 40s and never reconciled. Patricia carried guilt and regret about this for 2 decades. Then something shifted. She began writing letters to her deceased sister, pouring out everything she'd never said. She contacted people who knew both of them, asking for their perspectives. She journaled extensively about their childhood, their conflicts, the love that existed beneath the pain. Through this process, Patricia came to understand that she and her sister had been mirrors for each other, that their conflicts arose from seeing their own unhealed wounds reflected in each other, that the falling out, painful as it was, had forced both of them to face parts of themselves they'd been avoiding. This understanding brought peace. Not because it changed what happened, but because Patricia finally saw the purpose, the pattern, the deeper meaning beneath the surface events. 6 months after this period of intense review and integration, Patricia died peacefully in her sleep. Her family said she'd seemed more at peace in those final months than she'd been in years, because she'd completed the work. She'd extracted the wisdom. She was ready. The second manifestation of the life review compulsion is an urgent need to heal relationships, to ask for forgiveness, to offer forgiveness, to say the things that have gone unsaid. People experiencing this will reach out to estranged family members. They'll apologize for hurts they caused decades ago. They'll forgive betrayals they swore they'd never forgive. Not because they're trying to be good people before they die, but because the soul knows that unhealed relationships create entanglements that persist beyond death. The soul wants to be free when it transitions, and freedom requires completion, closure, the healing of wounds on both sides. Third, there's often a powerful drive to share wisdom with younger generations, to pass on what's been learned, to make sure that the insights gained through a lifetime of experience don't die with the body. Grandparents suddenly want to tell their stories, to explain their choices, to share the lessons they learned the hard way. Not lectures or advice, but genuine transmission of lived wisdom. This isn't ego. It's not trying to be remembered or to establish a legacy. It's the soul recognizing that wisdom is the one thing we can truly give to those who come after us. That experiences only have value if they're transformed into understanding and then shared. A man I heard about through a friend started recording voice memos on his phone about a year before his death. Just short reflections, stories from his life, lessons he'd learned, mistakes he'd made, and what they taught him. He had no conscious sense that death was approaching. He was simply compelled to do this. After he died unexpectedly from a heart attack, his children found hundreds of these recordings. And they said it was the greatest gift he could have left them. Not money or possessions, but his wisdom, his truth, his understanding of life. The life review compulsion is the soul's way of ensuring that the life was not wasted, that meaning was extracted, that wisdom was gained, that the essential lessons were learned and can be carried forward either into the next phase of the soul's journey or through the people who remain behind. If you're experiencing this compulsion, honor it. Make the phone calls, write the letters, seek the understanding, heal the relationships, share the wisdom. This is sacred work. This is the work that allows you to cross the threshold of death complete, at peace, with nothing left undone. And if someone you love is going through this, support it. If they suddenly want to talk about the past, listen. If they reach out to people they've been estranged from, encourage it. If they want to record their stories or write their memories, help them do it. Because they're preparing, the soul knows what it's doing. And this preparation is essential for a peaceful, conscious death. The fourth sign is the life review compulsion, the urgent need to understand, to heal, to complete, to share the wisdom of a lifetime before the transition. Sign 5, the pull toward home, the deep longing for something beyond. The fifth and final sign is perhaps the most profound and the hardest to describe. It's a deep, inexplicable longing for home. But not home as in a physical place. Home as in a dimension of consciousness, a state of being, a return to the source from which we came. People experiencing this pull often can't articulate it clearly. They'll say things like, "I just want to go home," when they're already in their own house. Or they'll stare out the window for hours, as if looking for something just beyond the horizon. Or they'll become emotional at sunsets, at wide open skies, at anything that suggests vastness, infinity, the beyond. This is not confusion. This is not dementia. This is the soul recognizing that its time in the physical realm is completing and beginning to orient toward what comes next. The pull toward home manifests as a homesickness that has no earthly cure. You can't fix it by going somewhere. You can't satisfy it with anything physical. Because what the soul is longing for exists beyond the physical dimension. Hospice workers often describe patients who keep asking to go home, even when they're in the place where they've lived for decades. Family members become frustrated, thinking the person is confused. But the confusion isn't in the patient, it's in our interpretation of what they're saying. They are not asking to go to a physical location. They're expressing a soul level awareness that they're preparing to return to a dimension of pure consciousness, to the place before birth, to the realm of spirit that is their true origin. One of the most moving accounts I've encountered was from a hospice nurse named Maria, who described an elderly woman named Rose. Rose had lived in the same house for 60 years. She knew every corner of that house. But in her final weeks, she kept saying, "I want to go home. Please take me home." Her children tried everything. They took her to the house where she grew up, to the city where she and her husband first lived, to places she'd loved throughout her life. None of it helped. She still said, "This isn't home. I want to go home." Finally, Maria sat with Rose and asked, "Rose, where is home? Describe it to me." Rose's eyes filled with tears. She said, "It's not a place, it's a feeling. It's perfect peace, perfect love. It's where I came from before I was born. It's where everyone I love who died before me is waiting. It's where I belong, and I can feel it calling me. I'm so close now. I just want to go the rest of the way." 3 days later, Rose died. Her last words were, "I see it. I'm home." The pull toward home is often accompanied by a sense of things winding us down, of completion, of a journey reaching its natural end. Not with sadness necessarily, but with the kind of peaceful acceptance that comes at the end of a long, full day when you're finally ready to sleep. People experiencing this often describe moments of profound peace that feel like glimpses of what's to come. They'll sit in meditation or prayer or simply in silence, and they'll touch something vast, something infinite, something that feels more real than physical reality. And they'll come back from those moments changed, lighter, less afraid. They might say, "I know where I'm going, and it's beautiful." This pull toward home is the soul's final preparation. It's the consciousness beginning to disengage from physical identification and remember its true nature. It's like waking up from a dream and realizing, "Oh, this isn't real. My real life is somewhere else, and I'm about to return to it." The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes death as a return to the clear light of pure consciousness. Many mystical traditions speak of death as the soul returning to God, to Source, to the Absolute. This isn't metaphor. It's description of an actual experience that the soul begins to sense as death approaches. If you're experiencing this pull toward home, know this. What you're longing for is real. It exists, and you will reach it. Trust the pull. Let it orient you. Let it comfort you. You're not losing your mind. You're remembering your origin. And if someone you love is expressing this longing, don't try to distract them from it or redirect their attention to earthly concerns. Acknowledge what they're feeling. Validate it. Tell them, "I know you want to go home, and when it's time, you will. Until then, I'm here with you." The greatest gift you can give someone experiencing the pull toward home is permission to answer that call when the time comes. Not rushing them, but not holding them back either. Loving them enough to let them go. The fifth sign is the pull toward home. The soul recognizing that its journey in the physical realm is completing and beginning to turn toward the dimension of consciousness from which it came. What these signs mean for how we live. We've explored all 5 signs: the pull towards solitude, the dissolving of attachments, the opening of perception, the life review compulsion, the pull toward home. And if you're experiencing one or more of these signs, you might be thinking, does this mean I'm dying soon? Not necessarily. Here's what's crucial to understand. These signs can appear years before physical death. The soul often begins its preparation long before the body begins its decline. Some people experience these signs at 30, others at 60, others at 90. The timeline varies, but the process is the same. The soul, knowing on some level that this incarnation will eventually end, begins the sacred work of completion, integration, and preparation. And here's the paradox. The practices that prepare you for death are exactly the practices that help you live most fully right now. Solitude and inner reflection lead to self-knowledge and authentic presence. Dissolving attachments creates freedom and focus on what truly matters. Opening perception expands your awareness and deepens your experience of reality. Life review brings understanding and healing. The pull toward home connects you to something greater than yourself. These aren't symptoms of dying. They're practices for conscious living. Think about it. What if you didn't wait until death was imminent to turn inward? What if you created regular time for solitude right now? What if you started letting go of meaningless attachments today? What if you paid attention to your expanded perceptions, your dreams, your intuitions? What if you reviewed your life now while there's still time to heal relationships and share wisdom? What if you cultivated connection to the spiritual dimension while you're still healthy and vital? You would live with more presence, more meaning, more peace than most people experience in an entire lifetime. This is why contemplating death is not morbid. It's the key to living fully. Because when you face your mortality consciously, when you prepare your soul for the eventual transition, you stop wasting time on trivialities. You stop postponing love. You stop hiding from truth. You start living as if every moment matters, because it does. There's a practice in Tibetan Buddhism where monks meditate daily on their own death, not to be morbid or depressing, but to stay awake, to remember that this life is temporary, that consciousness is precious, that there is work to do before the transition comes. And the result isn't fear or sadness, it's profound appreciation for life, deep gratitude for every breath, intense presence in every moment. This is what these 5 signs offer us. Not a diagnosis of impending death, but an invitation to wake up, to live consciously, to prepare our souls not just for death, but for the deepest, most authentic life possible right now. How to support someone showing these signs. If someone you love is showing these signs, you have an important role to play. Your task is not to fix them, to pull them back into normalcy, to dismiss what they're experiencing. Your task is to support their sacred process. When they seek solitude, give them space. Visit when invited, but don't force constant interaction. Understand that they're doing important inner work. When they're letting go of attachments, don't try to reinvest them in material concerns. Don't push them to care about things their soul is releasing. Support their simplification. When they're having expanded perceptions, believe them. Don't dismiss their dreams, their visions, their sense of presence. Ask them what they're experiencing. Learn from it. When they're reviewing their life, listen. Really listen. Don't interrupt with your own memories or interpretations. Let them process. Let them speak. Let them heal. When they express longing for home, acknowledge it. Tell them it's okay. That when the time comes, they can go. That you'll miss them, but you understand. Your role is to be a loving witness, to create safe space, to honor their journey. to resist the urge to keep them engaged with the world their soul is preparing to leave. This doesn't mean giving up. If they're fighting illness, support that fight. If they're living fully, celebrate that. But also recognize that on a soul level, preparation is happening. And that preparation is sacred. The greatest gift you can give someone who is showing these signs is conscious companionship. Be present. Be loving. Be honest. Don't pretend death isn't approaching if it is. Don't avoid the conversations that matter because they're uncomfortable. Talk about death. Ask them what they think happens. Share your own feelings. Create space for truth, for fear, for hope, for mystery. Because whether death comes in 6 months or 6 years, the time you have together is precious. And spending it in authentic connection, in real presence, in honest conversation about the deepest questions of existence. This is how we honor both life and death. We've journeyed through the 5 signs that death is approaching. The pull toward solitude, the dissolving of attachments, the opening of perception, the life review compulsion, the pull toward home. And what we've discovered is this: death is not a sudden catastrophe that happens to us. It's a process that the soul actively participates in, a carefully orchestrated transition that can take years to complete. The consciousness doesn't wait until the last moment to prepare. It begins long before physical symptoms appear. It creates time for the essential work of completion, integration, healing, and release. And the signs it shows us, far from being symptoms to fear or suppress, are invitations to live more consciously, to face our mortality with awareness, to prepare our souls not just for death, but for the deepest possible experience of life right now. Because here's the truth: you are going to die. I am going to die. Everyone you love is going to die. This is not pessimism. This is reality. And facing this reality clearly, accepting it fully, preparing for it consciously, this doesn't diminish life. It intensifies it. When you know that your time is limited, you stop wasting it. When you understand that consciousness is preparing for transition, you start doing the essential work now. When you recognize the signs in yourself or others, you can support the sacred process instead of fighting it. The practices we've discussed today, creating solitude, releasing attachments, opening perception, reviewing and completing your life, connecting to the spiritual dimension, these are not things to do only when death is imminent. These are practices for living fully right now. Start today. Create time for solitude. Examine your attachments and release what doesn't serve your soul's evolution. Pay attention to your dreams, your intuitions, your expanded perceptions. Review your life. Heal your relationships. Share your wisdom. Connect to something greater than yourself. Do this not because you're dying tomorrow, but because you're alive today. And this life, this precious, temporary, miraculous life, deserves to be lived with full awareness. Prepare your soul, not just for death, but for the deepest truth, the most authentic love, the most profound meaning available to a human being. And when death does come, whether in 50 years or 5, you will be ready. Not because you resigned yourself to it, but because you used the awareness of mortality to live so fully, so consciously, so completely, that death becomes not an ending, but a natural transition, a graduation, a return home. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for having the courage to face these profound questions about life and death. And if this video has helped you see death differently, if it's inspired you to live more consciously, then share it. Because millions of people are living in fear of death, and that fear is preventing them from living fully. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring these mysteries. The nature of consciousness, the meaning of life, the preparation of the soul for its eternal journey. And remember, the 5 signs are not predictions of when you'll die. They're invitations to wake up, to live fully, to prepare your soul for the greatest transition you'll ever make. Start preparing today, not by fearing death, but by embracing life with such presence, such gratitude, such consciousness, that when death comes, you'll be ready to say, "Yes, I lived, I loved, I learned, I'm complete, I'm ready to go home." See you in the next video.